Halle Bailey, The Little Mermaid, 2023. So, in 2023, Disney decided to drag another one of its animated classics into the world of live action, whether we wanted it or not. With a bloated budget of around $250 million, The Little Mermaid swam into theaters and pulled in about $570 million worldwide. Sounds like a lot, but once you factor in the massive marketing spend, the movie was pretty much dead in the water, struggling to break even. The plot is the one you remember. Mermaid Princess Ariel is obsessed with the human world, falls for a bland as unbuttered toast prince, and makes a deal with the sea witch Ursula to trade her voice for legs. Standard stuff. The problem wasn't the story, but the execution. In a move that shocked absolutely no one who's been paying attention to modern Hollywood, Disney cast Halle Bailey, a black actress, as the traditionally pale-skinned, fiery, red-headed Ariel. The internet immediately caught fire, with many seeing it not as progressive casting, but as a corporate-mandated DEI hire that ignored the source material entirely. The focus shifted from the film itself to the non-stop culture war debate surrounding it. To make matters worse, they updated the classic songs. Kiss the Girl was rewritten to include a cringy lesson on consent, just in case anyone thought Prince Eric was a villain for trying to be romantic. The result was a film that felt less like a fun fairy tale and more like a preachy after-school special. Disney chose to lecture its audience instead of entertaining them, and the disappointing box office shows just how well that went down. People wanted nostalgia, not a sermon. Rachel Zegler Snow White, 2025. Just when you thought Disney couldn't possibly mess up another classic, 2025 rolled around to say, "Hold my poison apple." The live-action Snow White was unleashed with a staggering budget north of $300 million, only to faceplant at the box office, struggling to even make back its production costs. It was less a blockbuster and more a cautionary tale about what happens when you despise your own audience. The story was supposed to be simple. Princess, evil queen, 7 dwarfs, magic mirror. But Disney handed the lead role to Rachel Zegler, who apparently decided her main job was to trash the original 1937 film in every interview she did. She proudly announced that the love story was being cut because the prince was a stalker and that this new Snow White wasn't going to be saved by some guy. Instead, we were promised a girl boss who was dreaming of being a leader, not of finding true love. The result was a film with a massive chip on its shoulder. Every scene felt like it was sneering at the fairy tale it was supposed to be adapting. The charm and romance were gutted and replaced with a tedious lecture on modern feminism that nobody asked for. Fans who grew up loving the classic were openly mocked by the film's own star, so is it any surprise they stayed home? Zegler's activism didn't empower the character, it just poisoned the well, turning a beloved story into an insufferable box office bomb.
It's time to restore our kingdom. Waiting on a wish.
Iman Vellani, The Marvels, 2023. The once unstoppable Marvel Cinematic Universe finally flew straight into a mountain. The crater it left behind was called The Marvels, a film that managed to become the biggest box office bomb in superhero history. Pulling in a pathetic $206 million globally, this disaster cost Disney well over $200 million, proving that even superheroes can get wiped out by bad decisions. The plot, if you can call it that, involves Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau, and newcomer Ms. Marvel getting their powers tangled, causing them to swap places every time they use them. This forces the trio of all-female leads to team up against a villain nobody can remember. Front and center in this mess was Iman Vellani as Kamala Khan, a Muslim teen fangirl from Jersey City. While the character had a Disney Plus show, her inclusion here felt less like a natural team-up and more like a desperate attempt at forced diversity. Her screen time often devolved into cultural lectures and cringy family moments that felt completely out of place in a cosmic superhero flick. The film was dead on arrival. Audiences had already signaled their fatigue with the preachy attitude of stars like Brie Larson, and shoving a woke teen hero into the mix was the final nail in the coffin. Instead of an exciting adventure, fans got a jumbled lecture on girl power and representation that completely forgot to be entertaining. The Marvels didn't just fail, it was a screeching alarm bell for the entire industry, a monument to what happens when you prioritize agenda over audience. Taika Waititi Thor, Love and Thunder, 2022. After the home run that was Ragnarok, you'd think handing Taika Waititi the keys to the franchise again was a no-brainer. Instead, in 2022, he took those keys and drove the whole thing straight off a cliff. Thor, Love and Thunder hit theaters, and while it made $760 million, the film was a colossal disappointment. It was a creative train wreck that felt less like a movie and more like a smug victory lap for a director who had started to believe his own hype. The plot sees Thor trying to find himself, only to be pulled back into action when a villain named Gore the God Butcher starts, well, butchering gods. To fight him, Thor teams up with his ex-girlfriend Jane Foster, who now mysteriously wields a rebuilt Mjolnir and has become the mighty Thor, complete with her own cancer subplot. This is where the whole thing goes off the rails. Waititi wasn't interested in telling a Thor story, he was interested in a feminist deconstruction of the character. The film spends its entire runtime making Thor a bumbling idiot to prop up its new girl boss hero. The tone is a mess, swinging wildly from a serious cancer storyline to screaming goats and painfully unfunny jokes. It felt like a bad SNL sketch stretched to 2 hours. The heart and badassery of the character were sacrificed for a cringe-inducing lecture on gender dynamics, all delivered with Waititi's signature smugness. Fans came for an epic adventure and instead got an agenda-driven comedy that forgot to be either epic or funny.
You're right.
Oprah Winfrey, A Wrinkle in Time, 2018. Disney decided to show everyone how to burn $250 million by turning a beloved children's book into a lecture. The result was A Wrinkle in Time, one of Hollywood's earliest and most spectacular woke budget disasters. The film was a black hole at the box office, losing over $100 million and earning a legendary 4% audience score. It wasn't just a flop, it was a warning shot for the preachy, message-driven filmmaking that was about to plague the industry. The plot follows a young girl, Meg Murray, on a cosmic quest to find her missing father. Guiding her are 3 all-knowing celestial beings, but the one who sucks all the air out of the universe is Mrs. Witch, a giant, glittering Oprah Winfrey. Her role isn't to be a character, but a vessel for endless, saccharine empowerment speeches. Every time the story threatens to get interesting, the adventure grinds to a halt so Oprah can deliver another self-help platitude that sounds like it was ripped from a daytime talk show. The film's primary mission was clearly not to entertain, but to serve as a sermon on diversity and inclusion. The adventure was just a flimsy excuse to string together a series of visually loud but emotionally empty scenes promoting a corporate-approved message. They were so focused on the optics of the casting and the self-congratulatory lessons that they forgot to write an actual story with stakes or personality. It was a joyless, patronizing experience that treated its audience like children in a mandatory assembly, and viewers rightfully tuned it out.
Be a warrior.
Phoebe, Waller-Bridge Indiana Jones, and the Dial of Destiny 2023. Disney and Lucasfilm decided the best way to honor one of cinema's greatest heroes was to humiliate him, drag him through the mud, and then charge people $20 to watch. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was a creative and financial catastrophe of epic proportions. With a bloated budget of over $300 million, the film crashed so hard at the box office that it ended up losing Disney more than $100 million, cementing its place as one of the biggest flops of the year. The plot sees a tired, miserable Indiana Jones on the verge of retirement who gets roped into one last adventure by his estranged goddaughter, Helena Shaw, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Thereafter, Archimedes' Dial, a device that can supposedly locate fissures in time. But the plot is just window dressing for the film's real mission: to replace Indy with a smug, unlikable girl boss who is better than him in every conceivable way. Helena Shaw isn't a character, she's an agenda. She spends the entire movie mocking Indy, punching him in the face and reminding him what a washed-up old relic he is. She's smarter, faster, and morally superior, a walking, talking embodiment of the strong female character trope who exists only to tear down the male hero. Audiences didn't show up to watch their childhood icon get lectured and abused for 2.5 hours. This wasn't an homage. It was a character assassination disguised as a sequel, and fans rejected this cynical, joyless deconstruction of a legend.
And now, a final triumph.
Sandra Bullock, The Unforgivable 2021. Netflix served up a perfect example of how to take a can't-miss premise and a huge star and poison it with preachy messaging. They released The Unforgivable, starring Sandra Bullock, a film that baited audiences with the promise of a dark, gritty thriller but delivered a clumsy lecture on social justice instead. While it tricked a lot of people into clicking play on day one, the film's reputation soured fast, becoming a textbook case of a movie that cared more about its agenda than its audience. On paper, the story is solid. Bullock plays Ruth Slater, a woman just released from prison after a 20-year stretch for a cop killing. Her one goal is to reconnect with the younger sister she was forced to leave behind. It's a setup ripe for tension, mystery, and raw emotional drama. It's the kind of movie that should have been an easy win, but the film just can't help itself. The central, compelling story of two sisters is constantly shoved aside to make room for painfully awkward subplots about racial allyship. Ruth's journey is interrupted by scenes where she, the hardened ex-con, becomes a white savior figure to her minority coworkers. These moments feel like they were written by a corporate HR department, existing only to tick a diversity box and preach to the viewer. The script grinds the narrative to a halt to deliver these teachable moments, completely derailing any suspense or character development. The execution was so blatant and condescending that it felt less like a story and more like a public service announcement.
Don't treat me like I don't exist! Tell her about me!
Mindy, Kaling, Late Night 2019. Back in 2019, the world was gifted a movie that answered a question nobody was asking. What if Mindy Kaling wrote a screenplay where she single-handedly dismantles the patriarchy of late-night comedy? The answer was Late Night, a film less interested in being funny and more concerned with being a woke TED Talk. After sparking a bidding frenzy at Sundance, the movie face-planted at the box office, failing to make a dent and disappearing faster than a tweet you regret. It was the cinematic equivalent of giving yourself a trophy, a smug, self-indulgent exercise in vanity. The plot centers on Catherine Newberry, Emma Thompson, a legendary late-night host whose career is circling the drain because her show is considered too old, too white, and too male. To fix her image problem, she impulsively hires Molly Patel, played by Kaling, a chemical plant worker with zero experience, as a diversity hire for her writer's room. Molly is the only woman and the only person of color, and it's her job to fix everything. This is where the movie becomes an insufferable fantasy. Kaling's character isn't just a new writer. She's a flawless beacon of comedic and moral truth. She effortlessly calls out her veteran colleagues for their privilege, teaches them how to be funny and relevant, and is celebrated as a genius for pointing out the obvious. The script, written by Kaling, is less a story and more a power fantasy, where she gets to be the smartest, most righteous person in every room. The film wasn't a comedy, it was a sermon written by the person in the pulpit for an audience of one. It flopped because audiences don't pay to watch a writer's idealized version of themselves win imaginary arguments.
Hardly any trash in it at all. Oh, it's kind of comfortable, better than a chair.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe.